So a lot going on in the world of sports, but I think the biggest story in sports this morning is this situation with SMU and the college football playoff. The college football playoff yesterday voted to give the ACC a lesser share for SMU joining. And as we talk about unintended consequences, I think it was just believed that the college football playoff executive committee would just be like, yeah, sure, we'll give the ACC a full share for SMU.
Dilly.
And I've never believed that SMU is a P5 brand. And I know that we've taken a lot of heat from our friends in Dallas County. I understand that SMU fans are passionate, but small but mighty, passionate Mustangs. I get it. But what is the college football playoff committee said here? They have said that they are not interested in rubber stamping the also runs of college football. And I think that's exactly what this statement says, is that SMU is not a big enough brand to get the top payment in college athletics. Now, I think it's also important to understand this is just for the next 2 years until the contract expires. And once that contract is renewed, if it is renewed, because I think that's also something that's up in the air with this Big Ten SEC movement. I think that's up in the air. But when you look at where SMU is for the next 2 years, they are going to be a financial liability hanging over the Dallas-Fort Worth community. It's not even Fort Worth.
Boy.
Hanging over the SMU community, because now those boosters are going to have to give significantly more money to offset losses in athletics. And I think this is a shot over the bow at the ACC, who continues, Jake, to find itself in controversy. And this may be unintended controversy, but it is what it is. I just think this is another shot over the bow of the ACC. They've got to do something to really bolster their standing in college athletics.
And there's no question that adding SMU for free essentially was never a good decision. And if you remember, that came on the heels of the Calford decision, which I still think wasn't a great decision. And so I think ACC leadership has kind of been, pretty average with their decision making lately. I think they handled the Florida State situation pretty well, the best that they could. I think they dropped the hammer on that pretty swiftly. But I think as far as expanding the conference, doing business inside of the conference, it hasn't exactly been great. And I think the problem is it's this old thing that we talk about on the show all the time. Like, if you don't win, you better have a value in another way, right? Like, there are brands in college football that don't win and don't go to the college football playoff with, regularity, not every single year, maybe twice every 5 years, but they're still extremely valuable to your conference. They still make you a ton of money because they have the TV audience, they have the viewership, they have the leverage that way. SMU has neither, with all due respect. You don't win, and you don't draw a big enough TV audience to justify what you're trying to get done. So, yeah, it is unintended consequences when you jump into a conference. You just assume the college football playoff is going to grant you P5 status so that you can go out and get your shares of the college football playoff. Because that's the other thing here not to be confused about, right? Everyone thinks, oh, well, SMU joined for no money. They're not going to get paid anything. That's actually not true. They joined and said, hey, we won't take any ACC TV distribution money. But when we get into the college football playoff as a conference, we're going to want our fair share. And we expect a full share because now we're in a P5 conference. So for SMU, for the ACC, it's a problem across the board. So, yeah, the donors in SMU land are going to have to cover the difference because allegedly, based on, the reporting and what we've seen, the money you would make in this, chopped down share, if you will, for SMU is going to be less than you were making in your prior conference. So again, you don't win. You don't have the TV audience. Now you're not going to be making as much money as you were, and your donors have to cover that difference. So yeah, I think that the SMU ACC thing has been rocky to say the least. And that's why I think we don't see it a whole lot. You don't see teams and schools just getting added for nothing, essentially. That's the issue.
Well, and we fought about this tooth and nail, whether it was, Oregon State or the value of the Mountain West Conference. Certainly SMU was in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's why when we were debating, universities like Tulane, universities like Memphis, when you have question marks surrounding your ability to compete at the highest level, and it's to your credit what you always say, that you haven't won football games. But was anybody ever going to compare Stanford and SMU? No, they were not going to do that. And I think when you look at SMU's value to the ACC, it's significantly less than Stanford. And I think the obvious is, well, Stanford was a P5 in the Pac-12. But I also think that SMU does not have a winning history. SMU does not have a recent tradition. SMU brings very little TV market to the conference. And I think the struggle for the college football playoff is they at some point had to put their hand in the dirt and get ready to get after it. And this is what they're doing. They are setting themselves up for future negotiations here. And I think the group that really should be looking at this is the Pac-12, because you're a 2-member conference, so you're already pushed out because you're not going to get an auto bid. You have to have a minimum of 8 now, we know. And I wonder what the compromise is going to be, because there was a compromise here for SMU. They're going to get some money. They're not going to get all of their money. So now the question is, what is a compromise for the Pac-12 or the Pac-2 in this case? And what do you do to try and secure a future beyond 2025, 2026 for the Pac-12? And the answer is, I don't know, because it does not seem to me, and it does not feel like to me in conversations that I've had, that there's a particular attraction for the college football playoff to Oregon State and Washington State. Not as a group, not as an entity, as separate entities in different conferences. Sure, that absolutely could happen. But I don't see any way, shape, or form that the college football playoff is just going to hand the Pac-12 a bag because the Pac-12 said so.
Yeah, and I think, the big part of that, again, is TV partners and whether you win or not. Again, think how different this conversation would be if Oregon State and Washington State were Oregon and Washington. Right?
Very different.
If you were Oregon and Washington, ESPN would be all over this. And as a result of that, the College Football Playoff Committee would be inclined to cut you some slack and maybe say, hey, yeah, we'll look the other way. We'll continue to give you X, Y, and Z because you guys win and you create a winning TV product. And again, it's this difference between Stanford and SMU. Stanford hasn't won a lot recently, right? But Stanford football is a brand. Stanford football has won in the past. We all know that. And by the way, you want to be affiliated with them in education. They're an educational powerhouse. So you have reasons to want a school like Stanford in your conference. The College Football Playoff Committee doesn't have a good reason as to why they should give Oregon State and Washington State as schools in really the Pac-12 or 2 or 5 or whatever the hell you want to call it, conference recognition. There's no reason to do that. So we can sit here and be like, oh, yeah, Kirk Schultz is going to stand in the way and he's going to do the leverage play. But the reality of the situation is he's not in a position to stand in the way. He doesn't have the money, the fortitude, the resources to try to sweat these guys out. That's the problem here. So, yeah, the question still remains. Why have you not merged with the Mountain West? Why have you not secured your future for the next, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the agreement would be? Why haven't you done that? Because what we do know is that your athletic department at Washington State is a mess. It's a mess. So I'm just trying to understand Kirk Schultz play here, the Pac-2's play here, because if you think that you're going to get all that money for them, you're out of your mind. They're not doing that. They're going to vote to change it from a 6-6 to a 5-7, and they're going to vote to say, hey, if you want to be part of the college football playoff, you got to have 8 teams in your conference. That's going to happen.
And I understand why Kirk Schultz, and it's a ridiculous conversation. Kirk Schultz essentially suggested that the Pac-12 would have revenue and voting power beyond 2025. That's what he's trying to. This has nothing to do with, where he sits currently. Kirk Schultz wants to guarantee that the Pac-12, which we don't even know is going to exist, would have a seat at the table and voting power on what happens with the college football playoff moving forward. To which everybody else said, no, that's not going to happen. And I think the thing that's very interesting is Kirk Schultz needs a 5-7 model, because ultimately he's not going to, as we've talked about at length for a year on this show, ultimately you are not going to have the ability to control your future. You have two teams in your conference. And I think the college football playoff is leveraging the Pac-12 by saying, hey, we'll make it 12 at-large bids in the college football playoff, instead of giving the G5 an extra seat at the table with a 5-7, the P4 and an automatic qualifier for the top G5. We'll just make it 12 auto bids, or 12 at-large bids, rather, with no auto bids go away. So the top 12 teams in the country, that's who's getting in the college football playoff. And what does that say to the G5? That says good luck. You're not guaranteed a spot every year. That's the conundrum for Kirk Schultz, who is in business with the Mountain West, who's a G5. He needs that spot. He needs that at-large bid. He needs that automatic qualifier. So this only ends one way. It only ends one way. I think it's really difficult, if you are Oregon State, to sit here and allow Kirk Schultz to control your fortunes. And we've repeatedly been told on this show that Oregon State really is in a no-win situation. They weren't able to find their way into the Big 12 or the Big 10, and they asked repeatedly, and they were rebuffed. I think the best route now would be for the ACC to melt down and have a reconfigured membership in the ACC, and somehow Oregon State, and likely by extension Washington State, end up there maybe. Like, if you're just going to sit here and try to get the power brokers in college football to guarantee you leverage for the next contract, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what you
that's not going to happen. Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's very difficult. And I think this is this waiting game, which, if you're Washington State and Oregon State, I think you're playing very, very well at this point, because all you're trying to do is elongate the process and hope that, hey, maybe the Big Ten and the SEC actually do make a move, which I don't think means they're going to leave the NCAA in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But maybe they do make a move. Maybe there is a higher tier. Maybe we can, when teams vacate to go to this higher tier, maybe we can slide in somewhere. The problem is, it doesn't mean that you're going to break up the Big Ten. It doesn't mean the Big Ten's going away. It just means that 2 or 3 universities, and now really 5 or 6 universities from the Big Ten, are going to wind up playing in this higher tier.
Yep.
And it's almost a no-win situation. And you feel terrible. You feel terrible for the Vandies of the world. I don't really feel bad for SMU. I think anytime you do work for free that you should be getting paid for, that's a you problem.
Facts.
I just don't believe that you should ever work for free. Not when there's absolutely value in the services you provide.
Yeah.
SMU completely gave away their brand. Said, we're desperate. We have nowhere else to go. Please take us for no money. For 9 years, no rights fees being paid. It's wild.
Yeah.
So I don't feel bad for SMU.
But I also think, again, on the ACC side, I don't feel bad for them either. You devalued your conference by doing that. Like, that was a bad look.
Yeah, but I also feel like there's this belief that this SEC Big Ten thing is every team in the SEC and every team in the Big Ten, they're just going to break away and have their own division. What sense does that make? What sense does that make? Because if you're Purdue, how are you going to schedule non-conference opponents?
I don't know.
Are you going to call the ACC or the Big 12, who you just said you guys aren't worth it, you're not on our level, and you're going to schedule games with them? And you really think the commissioner of the Big 12 or the ACC, or they're just going to be like, yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, let's do it. No, they wouldn't do that. And it does not help college football on a national level, which is what Greg Sankey has talked about repeatedly. We need better regulation across the board. We need to have leadership on a national level, which is why I continue to tell you the NCAA is not going away. I think it's just going to be significantly different. And their purview of things will be significantly different. You're not going to have a situation where the NCAA just disappears. You're not going to have a situation where these two conferences just go and take their ball and play against each other. That does not make any sense at all. And again, I ask you, if you're the Big Ten, do you not value any non-conference rivalries? Do you not? Do you really think that USC and Notre Dame are going to continue to play if Notre Dame's cut out of revenue? Come on. I just don't think that's realistic. I think what's more realistic is the structure of college football will change. Not the NCAA in totality. The structure of college football will change. You will have this upper tier of teams that will compete for more money and be able to pay players higher dollar values. And I think you are going to, within each conference, which will be pervasive across pretty much all of college football, you're going to have this upper tier, and then you're going to have this secondary tier. And I think it's simply going to push down, the old Division II will now be Division III, because there's going to be a new Division II and a new Division I.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's as simple as it needs to be. The idea that the Big Ten is going away or that the SEC is going away, who thinks that schools in the SEC are going to give away Southern tradition?
They're not.
Do you really think schools built on hundreds of years of belief systems? Do you really think the administrators who are going to make this decision, who have deep roots and ties dating pre-Civil War, you really think they're going to give up the SEC?
No.
That's not happening.
And I don't think anyone's asking them to do that. And I don't think that they're ever going to be in a position where that's at risk. I agree with you. I think that the big boys in college football are going to continue to be the big boys, and they just need to put together a system that allows them to continue to play the biggest games in college football. And I like what we talked about yesterday. I love the concept of a 3-tiered relegation system that gives the G5 and the lower end schools opportunity to climb the ladder, provided you can win football games. And obviously you'll run into the ceiling of talent because you're not recruiting on the same level as Alabama. But I think giving them that opportunity allows them to operate. And if they can feel good about it, I think that ultimately is what the lower tiers are looking for. They just want an opportunity to say, hey, we went out, we competed, we won the lower tier championship, and next year we'll try to win the next level. That's what I feel like is the compromise. This whole thing about, hey, at large bids or auto bids, or I think it puts the committee in a tough position, because you're having to do business based on just two models instead of saying, hey, let's expand our mind here and think bigger picture.
Yes.
How can we create a system that, encircles everybody and allows everybody the opportunity to go out and do what they want to do? And that to me is the long-term play, post college football playoff. That is what I think needs to happen.
Yeah. I don't see a situation where and again, I think yesterday amongst the craziness of Twitter DMs and so many people yesterday. And I again, if you're one of those people that DMs me on Twitter, the funniest part about Twitter is I get so many people who are like, it's really rude you don't answer my DMs.
Social media.
Do you know how many DMs I get?
Dude, you don't read my comment. When you do, you don't read the whole thing. Come on.
And then you don't read my DM. I'm starting to take it personally. But I think one of the funniest conversations I had yesterday was with this cat Royce about how the SEC is going to form its own league and that the SEC does what it wants. And I bring up Royce because I think the one point that Royce made that I thought was really smart was that Tony Petitti has no juice other than the money that the former commissioner made for him.
Facts.
Tony Petitti isn't a power broker in college sports. Not yet. And obviously, when you're the commissioner of the Big Ten, you people are going to take your phone call. But you look at Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey's the power broker. Greg Sankey's the guy that can get things done. And I think what Greg Sankey wants, at least as it's been explained to me, is he wants this group of universities, and a good number of them in the SEC, a good number of them in the Big Ten. I think the Big 12 absolutely is going to have 2 or 3 legitimate chances at that. But you're looking at teams in the ACC, and one of the interesting questions is like, what is the status of Dabo and Clemson? And we've debated this on the show.
Yeah.
But if you go league to league, right? Like we can talk about Alabama and Georgia and okay, is Vandy getting into there? Of course they're not. Is Northwestern? Of course they're not. Right? If you look at is in college football, is Houston getting into an upper tier?
No.
Of course they're not. Is Kansas football? Of course they're not. But if you look at Utah, if you look at like the question that I would ask, and I think one of the most talked about universities is Clemson and Oklahoma State. Is Oklahoma State truly one of the biggest, baddest programs in the country?
I'm a man.
Don't know that you can say that, man. They looked outclassed versus Texas.
And I would just also ask, is Oklahoma? Yeah, Oklahoma is.
Yeah, they are.
And this is where we get into this conversation about, okay, well, what do we have in the ACC? What do we have in the Big 12? Well, I think in the ACC, I truly think there's only one. And I think without question, I think that one is Florida State. There is just no doubt about it. But if I said to you right off the jump, is Louisville in an upper tier in football? Probably not. Probably not, right?
Nah.
NC State, Georgia
Nah.
Tech. So again, I ask about Clemson. Is Clemson in an upper tier of Power 5 football programs?
I think they'd probably make the cut just because they've shown an ability to get there and they've shown an ability to play and win in the big game. But it's just been many years now. Like
it feels like it's been many years. I think it has been, unfortunately, if we're truth telling, I think it's probably been 3 seasons since they have really been a national championship contender.
Mm.
And it's probably since Trevor Lawrence left. But looking at Dabo's record, and I think Dabo, without question, is part of this conversation. If you look at Dabo's record, I mean, it's not as though he's been terrible, 11-3, 10-3, 10-2. But he also hasn't been 14-1 Clemson, right? And what's the common denominator? Trevor Lawrence and a prolific quarterback. And when you go 10-2, 10-3, 11-3, and then this year you go 9-4, and you finish outside the top 10 every year, that's problematic because he's outside the top 10 the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that Clemson's not a power football program is crazy. It's crazy. It's the argument we had yesterday on the show, which admittedly may have gotten a little out of pocket.
You know.
It's USC not being a power program. Either they are. Clemson is. You know, the other one that I think is a real interesting question. What about the University of Miami? Miami Hurricanes football? Now, recently, no. History speaking, absolutely.
But see, this is why you need the relegation thing because you need to be able to say, okay, yeah, Miami, not recently, we're going to put you in the second cut, but you can earn your way into the top cut, right? Like that's why you need that because you don't want to just make it feel like, hey, we're permanently excluding the Hurricanes because when they're winning, that's a great brand. That is absolutely a great brand, but that's not who they are right now. That could change. So that's why I say like teams like UCF is a nice brand. They're not a top cut brand though. They're a second cut brand.
What about like, think about Pitt. Pitt football
Second cut.
Pitt football has history and tradition, but I agree. Boston College, no. Right? Like Dartmouth basketball, Absolutely. Okay. Anyway, my point is, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think in the ACC, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find 4. I think you can make the argument that Florida State and Clemson, without doubt, are in, and I think Miami's in. I think other than that, I think you have no idea. But I look at the Big 12, and I say to myself, man, that's going to be awfully difficult without Texas and Oklahoma, because they're both in. There's no question about that.
Right.
Right? Like, is Iowa State football in?
No.
Is K-State football in?
No.
Is West Virginia football in?
No.
That's a tough one. Texas Tech.
I don't think so. No.
I think you got to put Texas Tech in. No? TCU? Don't you have to put TCU in?
Yeah. I guess.
BYU football?
I think they're second cut. But again, this is what I always say about BYU.
It's tough, man.
See, BYU might get a free pass because of the ESPN thing, right? Maybe they scheme their way in. Like, so I don't know, dude. But again, this is my point.
BYU's got a national championship.
Yeah, but who the hell even remembers that?
Everybody?
I don't.
I think you're crazy. I think BYU's in. I think Texas Tech is in. TCU, I think TCU's in. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
TCU's
obviously the
in.
college football playoff appearance, there's no question. But again, that felt like a one-off, not a regularity.
Oklahoma State?
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. I think they're in. What about the new ads? Arizona State, Utah,
Utah's in.
Colorado?
No. Can't have Colorado in there.
Woo.
Not good enough yet. You haven't done anything.
But this is where the relegation conversation comes in.
Agreed. I think that's why I'm saying you're gonna have the premier top cut. Hey, you either have been in the college football playoff conversation in the 4-team format or you haven't. And Colorado hasn't. TCU has. That's their get me over. Texas Tech is not. Right? Like but again, this is why the relegation thing matters, because if you can say to Texas Tech, hey, yeah, go out and win the second cut, now you're in. Prove it. Win ball games. Then maybe we'll put more of a priority on NIL in the portal. And Dabo won't get a free pass for sucking for 3 years or whatever it's been and not having a quarterback. Then we won't have to talk about, Uyunglele leaving you to go to Oregon State, go back to Florida State in the same conference. Then maybe that conversation doesn't need to happen because you'll prioritize having a quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Does DJ leaving Clemson, is that a bad look? No doubt. Dabo's got to get in the portal.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, if you continue to be, it's awfully difficult to say Dabo's Clemson teams have been afterthoughts. Post Trevor Lawrence, it feels like you've been an afterthought. And it feels like Dabo doesn't want to get in the portal and doesn't want to embrace NIL. And if you're Clemson, how long can you let that go on?
Not very long.
And why did Dabo not get the Alabama job?
I think we know why he didn't get the Alabama job, because he's not a new age coach, and Kalen DeBoer is.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, Big O Tires and American Fork, your total car care experts. They are the should I say proud sponsors of College Football Talk on the Monty Show.
Yeah.
I think they are. It'll be great to have them on the show. It's always good when you can partner with the good people like Ryan at Big O Tires and American Fork. Also looking forward to having Jake Retzloff, the starting quarterback at BYU. Or is he? We'll talk to Jake about that coming up here in the coming weeks. Jake is going to be a regular on the show. So it's going to be nice to talk to him about, hey, what are your opinions on NIL? What are your opinions on, unionizing of, like, I think that this Dartmouth thing, and I know, again, this is just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I know it seems some far-fetched place, but if you're Dartmouth and you're the current men's basketball team, are you interested in forming a union?
And by the way, if you are, who's giving you that guidance? That's the other question that comes to my mind. You have
I
so
think
many
that's a
of these.
huge question.
You have so many of these athletes. Do they just have one lawyer giving them advice, or what's the deal?
Yeah. All right. Let's get your comments in here. Talking college football. Thanks to our friends at Big O Tire and American Fork. And again, when you think of Big O Tires and American Fork, you can think about a lot more than tires. Now, because I got my Michelin Cross Climate 2s from my guy Ryan at Big O Tires, that doesn't mean that all he does is tires. And that's a hell of a tire. The Cross Climate 2 from Michelin.
Amazing.
I have a Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit. And I had the worst drive of my entire life this past weekend.
We.
Yeah. 2 O's and almost died, Goose.
Yeah.
Coming back from Mesquite, Nevada, where we played golf on Friday night because some of us were not allowed to be outside of our apartments and condos for the weekend. We were locked down
these days?
with the hose. Anyway, the point is, so we had to like hustle foot back from Mesquite, Nevada to Salt Lake City in the worst snowstorm I've ever driven in. Like whiteout conditions, could not see 2 feet in front of my face. It was horrendous. And not one time did that Cross Climate 2 let me down. Not once. It is. And if you have not seen what a Michelin Cross Climate 2 is, you got to get your hands on it.
Yeah.
Because it's good in snow, it's good in rain, it's good in heat, it's good in cold. It is truly built for every climate. The Michelin Cross Climate 2, I love it. And the other thing I love is Ryan at Big O Tires and American Fork tinted my windows. He's the guy that does my oil changes. Like if you need car care, Big O Tires and American Fork is your home. I'm telling you, man, their level of service is on another level.
They also do lifts, which is amazing.
They do everything.
Yeah.
If you need work done on your car, Big O Tires and American Fork, a lift kit, suspension, wheels, tires,
Brakes.
any brakes, absolutely brakes, alignments, anything to do with your motor, anything to do with your car, you can hook it up at Big O Tires and American Fork. Make sure you tell them you heard about it on the Monty Show. Matt Ritson, how about Nebraska borderline in football? No, they're absolutely in. There's no question about it. Dude, listen, I understand nothing happened before 2010 in your life.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you won in the 80s, dude.
Yes, it does. And they won in the 90s as well, I would remind you. Nebraska is a multi-time national champion who have they had a difficult stretch of decades? Sure they have. Nebraska's in. That's not a conversation. Nebraska is in. And I look at the Big Ten and I look at their move to the Big Ten, 100% it was a mistake. There's no question about that. But I'm telling you, Nebraska's in. It's not even a conversation, in my opinion. Sean Rollins, as always, gifting 10 Monty Show memberships.
Nice job, dude.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate you. Harry Austin, a member of the show for 8 months. Thank you, Harry, my great San Antonian. What is the bigger mistake, adding Cal or SMU? I would argue Cal is the bigger mistake. See, I actually read the whole comment there.
Good job. You read the whole comment. Nice.
You're welcome. I can give you value propositions on Cal. Education, research, money, funds outside of athletics, prestige, partnerships, no doubt about it. Athletics beyond football, basketball, baseball, track and field. They have obviously they give you a footprint out west with Stanford. Right. They're in business with Stanford. I can give you 1,000 reasons why Cal was a good ad for the ACC. I think it was backward. It was a terrible decision for Cal. I think it was a good decision for the ACC. They needed membership. They needed P5s, and they got 2 of them.
Yeah.
I don't know what the value statement for SMU was. If you're the ACC, you added SMU because that's the difference, Harry, in my opinion. I think Cal brings you 1,001 reasons. They deliver the Bay Area to you along with Stanford. It's not a question. You look at the ability of Stanford football getting one of the top quarterback recruits to sign a letter yesterday. It's over. They're still drawing top football talent at Stanford. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it.
But again, that education piece, I'm telling you, football players, you love that or you hate that. So if you're a top quarterback recruit and you love it, you're going to go to Stanford.
Why did the Big Ten flirt with Utah?
Yeah.
Well, because they want that education piece.
Yeah.
They want that non-athletic bread. That's why. Big Blue Horses for $2. Who is in? Who is out? Let the litigation begin. You're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're not wrong. And I know, Jake, again, nothing happened, before 2019 in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at, you notice how it's getting closer and closer.
Hell no.
In the Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, certainly. And we're talking about football only. In the West, Wisconsin, Nebraska, certainly. I don't know. Is Iowa one of those schools that's in?
But here's the problem for Nebraska. Washington, Oregon, SC, and UCLA are all in.
Sure.
So I don't know. Maybe there won't be regulation around how many teams you can add. Maybe the Big Ten will just put 10 teams in. I don't know.
Well, I doubt that. I mean, you're not putting Illinois, Purdue.
No, but I'm being
Minnesota.
serious. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC. I mean, hell, that's 7 right there.
And
so
I don't have Nebraska. I have no doubt Nebraska and Wisconsin are in.
So that's 9.
I have no doubt about it.
So you see what I mean? So is there going to be a cap on how many teams you can add?
No, because I think if you go to the SEC, it's just about the whole MFing conference, right? If you look at Texas and Oklahoma, the new.
Yep, they're definitely in.
That's 2. But then you look at the Blue Bloods, Georgia, Tennessee is definitely in. Florida is definitely in. Bama, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas A&M, Auburn's definitely in. Are you really going to leave out Mississippi State and Arkansas? I have trouble with that. They're definitely in.
What's the defining factor?
Big football money-making institutions.